Kaiju, turtles, Dragon Ball, and more. It's Steven's Toy Reviews. Hey there, collectors. It's going to be Steven here, and welcome to another dinosaur review. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Ceratosaurus leader, Large Roof from Axytoys, who made this review possible for the orange version. And the reason why I say this review is because I do have the two other color variants on order right now. So not only is this review meant for you to have an idea of how this figure looks, but also a benchmark for whether or not I will be keeping my order. So we have another release in the dinosaur battlefield lineup, and it is not going to be an herbivore. It is going to be another carnivore. We have already had a gigantic T-Rex. We have already had a couple of minions and another leader. So do you need this one, or is it worth sitting out? I haven't canceled my other orders. Let's take a look to see whether or not he's going to be worth adding into your collection. So I do have to say here, for the body, he's pretty much going to be using the Carnotaurus leader body, which was improved from the minions that you could get already that were on the market. Now, for this one, it is improved with the musculature and the articulation, which we will obviously see in that section when we go over everything, but there will be some new parts, notably for the head, because obviously this is going to be an entirely different dinosaur, the feet as well. So when it comes to the sculpt, we already know that it looks fantastic. Now for this particular one, we are able to see that it is a nice blending in of the orange paint application, and we do have some stripes on this particular leader. Now we don't have a minion of this dinosaur yet, which would be really cool if we get at some point later. I guess you can get more of these and strip him of his armor, which you can do and I will show you, but nevertheless, we only have the leader at this time. He does have some tiger stripes, and that is really neat considering it's orange. You know, tiger is orange. And realistically speaking, I don't necessarily see any particular quality control issues on this unit. As we will see in the accessory section, however, the hands that this figure comes with, we're going to have two default small gripping hands, which are rather tight for the axe, the tomahawk, the butcher knife accessory, whatever you would prefer to call it, and then the shield. As you put them in and out of his hands, the nails tend to get a bit scraped up. And then we do have a larger right weapon holding hand and a left splayed hand. That would be it for hands. Yeah, the nails do tend to get scraped up a little bit if you're too rough and you don't use heat. But other than that, I really don't have too many quality control issues or issues, period, with this figure. Obviously, he is going to play dress up. We do have the option to go into Barbie's dollhouse, if you will. That section, tagged in the description with timestamps, will be later. Large Roof here is going to be using the same body as the Carnotaurus leader. So if you are familiar with that figure, then congratulations, you know what the articulation scheme is. However, for this particular one, I did have a couple of, I don't necessarily know if it's just fit, maybe it's tolerance differences, but I will walk you through that just in case you happen to have something similar yourself. So what do we have here? Because there are going to be some differences because obviously there are different dinosaurs. So we are going to have the jaw, which opens and closes. Yay! There you go. See? And then as you can see, the head does move. And the head is going to be on a ball joint, and it is going to be on a double axis or barbell style. So our Large Roof can look up towards the roof. Or you can look down a little bit towards the basement. See what I did there? That's you can, anyone, if you want to do maybe Large Roof and small basement, there you go. A little bit, you know, left and right, no problem, twist and turn. Now, if you want to get more neck articulation, we do have the neck joint as well, where it plugs into the body to get more movement, so that's good. And then also just a little bit of turning left and right, not really cocking side to side. Shoulders. Let's go ahead and move the pads out of the way. As you can see, they are plugged in on a peg, so they do swivel around. No issues there. And then we do have a hinge, which allows our dinosaur leader here to T-pose, you know, as if this thing does not need any more strength on its enemies, which is fine. No butterfly hinge, which would be interesting to see, but I think with the rest of the movement in the arms, it's okay. We can sort of fudge the articulation to get those poses that are needed. Now, here's where we get interesting, and here's where I ran into a little bit of an issue, but it was easy to fix. But for those of you who like customization, you're going to be doing this sort of anyway. So we do have a bicep swivel, which was really easy for me right out of the box. It twists and turns, that's fine. And then we have a single hinge elbow. We get pretty much 90 degrees out of that. You can see there's an appropriate cut out there, a little sculpt out, if you will. So this way it conforms to the muscle that we have there, because, you know, he's got a big muscle there. Now, the issue that I had is that there is going to be, come on here, this will be the best way, a dedicated swivel here as well. And that is going to be because this peg actually goes all the way up through the bicep and plugs in here. But this does act as well as a swivel, you can see, because it moves this part. This was near completely stuck for me, and it was basically making noise. It was almost as if I was twisting the plastic itself. So I had to fix this because I didn't want to break it, and I was in fact twisting the plastic. So let's go ahead and throw some stills up here, and you can see that, interestingly, aside from just that, all of the hinges, if you look at them, it looks like they're split down the middle. And it's not because they're cracked in any way, but it's because that's how the peg works to plug in. And the peg is going to be sort of just on the one half of the disc of the hinge. So if you do feel any sort of tight joint, please do not force it or twist it or anything when you are moving the figure. Let's just go ahead and jump back. Because if you do, it is not going to be a super duper, really high, strong connection. You do want to be gentle with it. So if you do have any sort of tight joint, I do suggest lubrication. I have a video on dish soap. You can use shock oil. Both will work. Link will be popping up, hopefully some here for a card. It's not necessarily a defect in any way. Sometimes we have tight joints. If you are not comfortable as well, you can just mess stuff around. This we'll talk about in a second when we come to the accessories. So for the wrists, we do have, swivels and hinges, as we would normally do. And since we do have interchangeable wrists, I'll go ahead and pop it off. You can see that the hand plugs in on a peg there, and it's pretty easy. I did use heat to sort of loosen up some of the stuff as well. So we do have an ab crunch, which is a ball joint. Twist and turn and rock from side to side, which is great. And then the waist, I'll talk about as well. It's going to be on a ball joint. We get some movement there as well, which is pretty nice. Ooh, we'll see that actually up close and personal in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead. That popped off. Don't worry. That'll happen from time to time. I'll talk about the tail right now just because we're on our way down. It will become detached in the package. It's not, you have to plug it in. So it's pretty simple. You just use a little bit of heat if it doesn't want to plug in, but it's on a hinge, moves up and down. And then we get a bendy wire, which sometimes it's difficult to move, like it doesn't feel like it wants to move, but once you do get the initial push out of the way, then it will move for you. For the hips, they are plugged in on ball joints, as you can see. So large roof can kick that far forward and that far back, thereabouts. And then as well, off to the side to do the splits like this. I will say that, interestingly enough, depending on the temperature, this hip for mine sometimes feels like it is rather tight, and then a little bit later it will loosen up a bit. So again, joint tolerance, drop a little bit of your preferred lubricant in there if you're worried, not a big issue. We do have dedicated thigh swivels, as you can kind of see there, where we can twist and turn if you need a little bit more movement aside from what the ball joint offers. Just like the bicep swivel, we do have single hinge knees that do also have a swivel, and as well there is that little cutout, so we get just a bit more range of movement. The shin, I guess you may call that piece of armor, does block the view of the joint, but we do have ankle joints which do allow ankle rocker movement because there's a peg there, and hinge forward and back, so that is good. Now, I haven't really talked about it, but I did show you it in the intro pictures, but large roof here, like the rest of the Dinosaur Battlefield figures, does come with a full armament. But when you do take the figure out of the box, like I said, this is going to be pretty much how he is presented, right? So you can take everything here off of the figure, right? So I showed you that you can take these pegs off. They are really tight the first time, but after that, it's smooth. And you can reveal what his torso fully looks like. For the waist, the arms and the legs, there isn't going to be a specific like fastener you can pop off, but you can, as I showed you, pop off the arms and really the rest of the joint. So if you really want to get the wrist parts off, you can do that, which I suppose is fine enough. But if you want to get the leg ones off as well, you're going to have to pop off the feet. So if you want to do that, you can. You got to work with it, but you get the point, right? It's kind of fighting with me here on camera. Let me get this popped back in. Okay, so what about the waist? How do we... You do that, and then you take it off. This is kind of a pain to put back the correct way. I don't even know if it was, but there you go. Nice and simple and easy. So if you're looking to do that, you can make yourself sort of like a barbarian Ceratosaurus, if you will, but we need ourselves a fully armed up dinosaur. So how do we do that? Let me go ahead and show you. So now we get to do our favorite feature with our dollies, and we are going to go ahead and play dress up with our Ceratosaurus, our large roof. And for this one here, I will say that it is going to be just a little bit difficult. And obviously, whenever I do demonstrations like this, I'm, as the saying goes, walking and chewing gum at the same time, because I'm trying to look at what I can best describe as the instructions while at the same time trying to make sure things are in frame correctly and so on and so forth. So first, the shin pads, the guards, were actually flipped on mine, taking it out of the box, so I correct that. That's what you're kind of seeing on the screen right now. So for this figure, yes, like I said, the armor parts are softer plastic, so some of the spikes, the bones, and so forth, they can be a little difficult to push in and stay in. Now, that has been an issue with the Dinosaur Battlefield line so far, but here it is just a little bit more so. Now, beyond that, however, I do want to note that these figures have what is called in the Gunpla, the Gundam plastic model community, as a hardpoint system. So there are going to be holes throughout the different armor parts on this figure, as well as the other Dinosaur Battlefield figures. What this means is that you can take those parts that are on other figures or this one, and you can move them around. So for an example, you may have those bones that we'll see coming up on the shoulder pads, and you can place them on the shin parts because the holes are going to be the same size, vice versa, and even with some other releases that if they would go in the same hole, giggity, you can swap them around. So it's not necessarily one-to-one following what would be instructions. You can make stuff up as you go along. Now, that is something that I will note. There are effectively instructions that you can find online. If you look at the promotional postings for this figure, particularly, if you look at the promotional stuff, you will see that there is included a list of accessories, and that includes all of the armor parts with the different spikes and bones and so forth next to the armor parts. The issue is, however, it does not show you exactly where each part goes, nor is there any sort of indication in the box itself how everything is attached. So if you just so happen to order this and you don't think to go back, you're kind of left in the dark and only to your imagination how everything is put together. While that's not necessarily an entirely bad thing, because maybe natural instinct is to go back to the listing, it is a bit frustrating to be left in the dark like that to your own devices to figure this out to match one-to-one with the promo pics. But considering that can be fixed, I'll kind of leave it back to you whether or not it is a fault or a slight against the figure, because you can look it up and figure it out. I'd say it's ultimately a neutral, because once you do get them put together, it does look rather great. Now, what I will say as well, when we do get to the helmet and the overall head armor, there are going to be 2 3M sticky pads that are included. One is already attached to the neck piece, and the other one is going to be so this way you can use it on the actual helmet. This is intended so this way it stays on better when you attach the respective pieces. Not necessarily needed to be used, but it prevents frustration. And don't worry, if you do use it, you can still remove the different parts. It just makes the contact easier for removing and placing on the parts. All right, now that we have our dinosaur Barbie all dressed up and ready to go, let's just take a look at the articulation again now as we move him around, so this way you can get a feel of maybe how delicate he may or may not be. I made some slight changes just so this way maybe we can take a look at, rocking him back and forth and making sure nothing really did happen to fall off. Now, you did see in the section where it did look like there were a couple of parts that were falling off, like maybe these tusks up over here and these little doodads and so forth. What I will say is that the armor is made of a somewhat softer plastic this time around than some of the other releases that we do have in the line, and that does mean that some of the parts will fall off from time to time. Thankfully, they are somewhat easy to put back on because they are soft. What I will say, what helps is turning the parts almost like it's a screw. That seemed to get them in a bit easier, not twisting back and forth, like literally twisting them like a screw. Also, first instinct may be to keep these sort of horizontal. I turn them vertical. It doesn't necessarily allow these to be seen fully like normal, but it does happen to help more. I will also note that if you are a bit worried about anything in particular, if you don't necessarily want to put the figure back in the box, you want to keep them on display, if you're not worried about maybe even keeping the box, you do have the option for glue. So you can see there, again, that you're going to have maybe some stuff falling off, but you can just hook them right back on. Okay, so the range of movement really does not change too much. You just have to be mindful of where your hands are and you don't accidentally, knock stuff off. But again, if that should happen, you can pop stuff right back on. And like I made mention, we do have the ankles guard, which is now set the correct way. No real change there. Moving the bicep around, it just moves the armor. And there you go. So one last thing, because it is a point of articulation, I would say, now that we have him all dressed up and ready to go, let's kind of put him to the side there with his extra tripod tail. You can't have a leader without, there you go, his cape. He does come with a cape, and it's pretty easy to attach because there's no extra part that you have to make sure it's lined up on. It comes with its own clasp. So what you can do is just put it around his neck, like so. You can put it over the armor. You can put it under the armor, on the shoulder. Just push the head up, and then you can clasp it just like that. And of course, if you do it with the armor on, you can just tuck it in when you're done as you knock stuff off. And just push it back on, and there you go. There is a bendy wire in the cape, so you can make it flowing as if he's attacking his enemies. Awesome. So let's go ahead into the close-up shots of the different parts that we have on Large Roof's armor, so you can see the finer details, which do look great. And I do think that, again, Axytoys knocked this out of the park for the finer details of this figure. I think that the armor has a nice wash and a nice blend to it overall. I think that in terms of coloration, it looks pretty solid. Looking at the promo pics of everything, I will say that it does not seem that there is much of a difference between the two different standard non-limited color variants, opposed to the green one, which does have a significant color variance. But when we take a look at the weapons, which will be coming up shortly, you will see that the weapons do have a nice coloration to them, which is going to be bloody. So all in all, that is what this figure will absolutely look like. And of course, we have the 360 spin view, because I feel that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to have this figure all nice and dolled up. So for accessories, Large Roof is going to come with 2 extra sets of hands, and we are going to get a total of 3 extra weapons. We are going to get a nice large battle axe, which I think is pretty cool. It has a little dangly bit from it. It looks like it's going to be a tooth or a claw of some kind. We're going to get a giant shield that is going to have a skull of a fallen enemy, and then we are going to have a little dagger or a small sword, whichever you would prefer. Now that, as you did see in the equipment section where we got our Large Roof dressed up, that does fit on his waist, his hip, and it can fit in a couple different ways with that bone scabbard sheath equipment type thing. So you can have that attached to him if you would like. For the shield, what you can do is you can adjust the skull, so this way it does look in a different direction compared to the promo pics, if that is something that you want. And it does come with 2 horns, so if you are looking to match up 1-to-1 compared to the prototype pictures, or if you don't want to, that's just something that you can keep in mind. Now, I do show you here that you can change the direction of the skull, but it doesn't really accommodate for the way that the handle goes on it. But let me know your thoughts. Do you like it one way or do you like it the other? So the horns that are going to be on the skull are actually a little soft, particularly on the actual skull itself. So keep that in mind. It's not really all that sharp. The bloody detail is pretty awesome because even though this is going to be a shield, clearly this can be a weapon, and it has been used in several battles. Now, one critique that I will have for the Dinosaur Battlefield lineup is that the default hands, which are clearly meant to be in some way holding hands, they can pretty much be used for fists too. They are very, very small for clearance for different weapons. So even though they can be used for the main weapons that the different characters come with, at least for the smaller dinosaurs, not necessarily the T-Rex, it is very worrisome getting weapons in and out because you have to push, you have to use heat, and when you do that, there is a little bit of worry of paint transfer. So that is something to keep in mind. So use heat if you are going to do that. Of course, there are alternate hands. Which sometimes make this easier, but nevertheless, if there is not a 1-to-1 alternate hand ratio, then that is something to really keep in mind. Now, a 360 spin view for Large Roof here, and I think I will make up for action shots with a fun extra shot at the end, because this review has gone on nice and long enough. I think the accessories are just fine enough considering everything that is included with the figure for the hardpoint feature and so forth. But if you do need more accessories, you know I have videos to help you out. Now, a size comparison so you can see how big the figure is, and if you're familiar with the other figures in the Dinosaur Battlefield line, since this is again going to be a reuse of the body, then you pretty much know how big this figure is going to be. Fits in just nicely. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. Well, I will tell you my thoughts right at the end. I'm going to say it's a win. I do like the figure. I think it looks very, very sleek. I think this is a unique addition to the carnivores in the lineup. Though I do think that a new body would be cool for another dinosaur coming up that's going to be in this line, but we do need some herbivores. I will say that more so first. I think that the paint apps are really cool. I think the weapon designs are awesome, and this one is just enough of a change in pace for what we have on the market so far that it is going to add a very unique presence on the shelf. And I will really say that the only drawback is going to be the softer plastic when it comes to putting in the smaller spike parts and so forth. That can be a little fiddly, stuff falling off and popping out. It can be a little time consuming and frustrating. Other than that, I think that if you're interested in this, it is definitely worth picking up. Now, I know that this one was sent in as a review sample. However, it just reinforces why I'm going to keep my orders of the green and the white one.